1972 Superbird 304 Mini Hemi. Plymouth Superbird flips off France. For 1972, Mopar's Winged Warriors, along with the Ferrari-faced 71 Ford King Cobra and Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2, are limited to a tiny 305 cubic inch engine instead of 430. Hence, Superbird is Plymouth's NASCAR equivalent of Valiant's CUDA AAR Trans Am homologation car. Both employ the 6-barrel 304 Mini Hemi, close ratio 4-speed, extra stiff torsion bars and rear leaf springs, rear anti-sway bars, and 15 by 7-inch wheels. The 6-pack 441 and 304 are the only 72 Detroit engines that use premium fuel, multiple carburetors, and high compression ratios. The Bird makes major strides in pragmatism with a foot shorter front overhang. However, the hood retains a ponderousness that we never got used to, even after practically living in the car for 6 days. Today, Plymouth is a performance Goliath compared to the puny David that it was 10 years ago. In '62, Plymouth offered a downsized, lightweight Sport Fury with a 360 cubic inch, 305 horsepower engine. The 330 horsepower 383 Golden Commando came in '63. In '64 came the big bore 426 Wedge, followed closely by the 426 Race Hemi. In '66 came Richard Petty's stock car winning streak and the Street Hemi. Plymouth started to win you over with its sub-brand '67 Valiant Barracuda. It mastered the junior supercar game in '68 with the Valiant Roadrunner, which outsold GTO in 1969. In the middle of Plymouth's biggest-selling supercar year of 1970, the NASCAR ringer Plymouth Superbird debuted. The Superbird was, as they say in marketing, high concept. It turned the original Roadrunner idea on its head. Instead of being the cheapest Mopar supercar, it was the most expensive, thanks to its standard 426 Hemi, power steering, disc brakes, 15-inch mag wheels with big G60 tires, torque flight automatic, and premium sport satellite interior. With its giant pointed nose and wing, it was meant to lure Richard Petty back from Ford, whence he defected in 1969. Since Valiant Roadrunner was ruling the NHRA roost, Plymouth figured it could reclaim Petty's 60s NASCAR glory with the Roadrunner brand. The Superbird embodied Plymouth's triumph over Pontiac, which had lost its way without John DeLorean at the helm. But at the end of the '70 season in November, NASCAR boss man Bill France doubled the production requirement to 1,900, twice the number of Plymouth dealers, while Plymouth was able to find takers for 950 70 Superbirds. The 71s have piled up on dealer lots. It's not just the Superbird. All 71 performance car sales dropped significantly. But Plymouth now stands astride the supercar hill, having held the top sales slot for 3 years. For 1972, Plymouth is not letting trifles like market relevance or sales potential dim its determination to be the preeminent performance brand. Hamburger stand chic notwithstanding, was it really tough to figure out that the $5,000 19-foot-long, 10-mile-per-gallon 1971 Superbird wouldn't sell? Plymouth's premier 72 supercar is, of all things, a restyled Superbird. It has the smallest engine, hardest ride, and fewest luxury amenities available, but it is the acme of supercar development. This radical car embodies classical Greek hubris on 4 wheels. Just as it was about to debut in September, NASCAR boss man Bill France announced the Mopar Daytona and Superbird Winged Warriors, along with Ford's King Cobra, will be limited to pint-sized 305 cubic inch engines for the '72 racing season. But rather than cancel their new Superbird, Plymouth simply complied with the rule. Never before has NASCAR gone so far to ban a car, and never before has a manufacturer gone to this length to sidestep the ban. Plymouth tries for its own version of Dodge Charger with a new personal Sebring 2-door coupe. It rides on a 117.5-inch wheelbase and enjoys better weight distribution and a longer hood than the 116-inch wheelbase satellite sedan. Plymouth's personal car comes in 2 series, the Sebring and Roadrunner. We find it interesting that the Pontiac GTO started as a top-of-the-line Le Mans, but becomes the budget supercar for 72, while the Roadrunner started as a bargain basement Valiant compact, and now becomes Plymouth's senior intermediate flagship. The Superbird is one of 3 Roadrunner models. They retain only a few vestiges of the budget supercar concept. The base model still uses the LA Block 343 engine, which offers great weight distribution in the heavier, long wheelbase chassis. It's no longer a drag strip ringer, but an insurance agent mesmerizing ratio of curb weight to horsepower. The higher ratio allows you to get an affordable insurance policy on a flamboyant street machine. Even the Boss Plymouth GTX flagship is now subsumed under the Roadrunner brand. The Roadrunner GTX is positioned as an ultra-luxury supercar, Plymouth's combination of the Dodge Charger RT and Charger SE. Plymouth's appeal to widely divergent buyers with the same basic car comes off as somehow tawdrier than Dodge's. We think the Charger is a much better looking car than the Sebring, but it now shares Charger's loop-style front bumper. This is a great advantage over the 71 Superbird because the new nose cone is a far simpler and easier fit than the 70. The cone is shorter, increasing body length by only about a foot rather than by 2 feet. It works in concert with the front corner air dams that reflect airflow around the car instead of under it. The cheaper and more pragmatic Superbird uses the high-winding 304 cubic inch mini Hemi engine from the Trans Am Racing Mopar pony cars. Though sharing the iron block of the 343 mill, its heads are made of aluminum. The triple carburetor intake manifold is also aluminum, helping make the 304 70 pounds lighter than the 343, at only about 475 pounds. The 304 has solid valve lifters and Mopar's wildest camshaft, with 292 degrees of duration and a half-inch of valve lift, and can rev past 7,000 RPM. The 304's 2.95-inch stroke means that at 7,120 RPM, the piston speed is the same 3,500 feet per minute as the 3.5-inch stroke 426 Hemi, revving at 6,000 RPM. Our test model was more sparsely equipped than the 71 Superbird, but still included 2 tone bucket seats and a console surrounding the 4-speed floor shifter. The interior is a quantum leap above the previous Satellite, with 2 inches more hip room, a steering wheel that's finely positioned lower and further away, and an instrument panel similar to the Barracuda. In order to make the Superbird a more appealing purchase, Plymouth's most exotic supercar costs substantially less than last year. Part of the Superbird's lower price is that only a few accessory drives can be run with the high-strung 304's weak idle. The smog pump and power steering pump are geared to withstand the engine's broad RPM range, but air conditioning is far too heavy a burden to bear. A major problem for dealers in Dixie, where the Superbird should have the greatest appeal. Power steering is sometimes eschewed with high-strung engines because it's harder to choose a correct pulley size when RPM varies so greatly. Plymouth chose a bigger pulley to prevent burnout at high RPM. We found it can exert enough leverage to make the weak idling 304 stall out. The extra RPM range of the 304 made us curious if it would outrun the 426 Superbird. So verily we did commence saying things like, "Pray thee and pretty please" to the blessed Mother Mopar. We beseeched and begged Plymouth to let us test the Superbird's top speed. After weeks of non-stop novenas, Plymouth's press wranglers invited us to pilot a 72 Superbird from Michigan down to Talladega, Alabama. We expected to beat the 150 mile per hour top speed Plymouth claimed for the 71 426 Hemi Superbird. First and most importantly, we're happy to report that the all-new Superbird was a roomy, comfortable, and pleasant place to spend a week. This is a car that looks big and sprawling, yet drives tight and light with less chassis flex than last year, thanks to a stiffer body resulting from new reinforced C-pillars. These are meant to conform to whatever rollover standard Congress throws at Detroit. Our test car had the standard 355 axle ratio. With a full load of passengers and luggage, the engine had to be raced to avoid lugging or stalling from a standstill, especially on inclines. Based on our experience with this Superbird and the AAR CUDA, we still feel a 391 axle makes a delightful option for the typical American customer because it lets you use up the 304's RPM band below triple-digit speeds, which our car could achieve in third gear. The Talladega high-speed oval opened only a few years ago and was built on the concept of reaching over 200 miles per hour on the straights. We were granted 4 hours of precious track time and 4 Goodyear Eagle racing tires, which arrested our fear of street tires flying apart at 150 miles per hour. In the cool, still morning air, we chose an ellipse around the speedway that allowed the greatest entry and exit speeds. We barely employed the brakes and used the high oval to slingshot us into the straightaway where the stopwatches were set up. The unique throttle linkage has an effective 3-barrel mechanical actuation of the 3 2-barrel carburetors, making the throttle response smooth and predictable. We were able to grow comfortable dancing the Talladega Boogie in 6 shakedown laps. Then, on our very first all-out attempt, we pushed the top end to 158 miles per hour at 7,100 RPM. We repeated this result for 2 laps, and then, thanks to increasing ambient heat and engine temperature, we suffered slower and slower times until admitting defeat. 158 miles per hour was it. Though rated at 290 net horsepower, at 6,000 RPM, based on curb weight, frontal area, and drag coefficient, we calculate at its top speed of 158 miles per hour. The 304 was making 375 gross horsepower. Though we don't usually get to use Talladega as a test track, we're all but certain no other car we've tested could match it. It's an amazing accomplishment. No longer available as a convertible, the mid-size Plymouth gets a retractable sunroof panel. It did not rattle or allow the slightest wind whistle to ruffle our bird's feathers. Parking in a giant supermarket lot is easy as the car can be spotted from 300 yards thanks to the big wing. A car that looks this fast gets lots of attention from lawmen, so on the way from Michigan to the heart of Dixie, we certainly didn't try reenacting the Vanishing Point movie. We were well rewarded with an old-fashioned 15.5 mile per gallon average for our highway journey. That includes plenty of passing maneuvers where a shift into third fairly catapulted us around the slowpokes. Unlike GM and Ford's all-new 72 Intermediates, Mopars have not gained hundreds of pounds. Then subtract the 300-pound lighter engine from the 71 Hemi Superbird curb weight. Factor in the aerodynamic nose and 5-liter engine, and you get impressive fuel economy. The high-strung 304 pumps out more power at its peak, but consumes fuel like the small V8 it is at lower RPM. In fact, Plymouth's racing strategy with the Bird is actually not to beat the Cyclones and Monte Carlos with greater top speed, but rather to skip a few refueling pit stops. The superior aerodynamics and 30% smaller engine mean even though the 304 revs about 1,000 RPM higher than the 7-liter racing engines, it consumes about 20% less fuel. We ultimately found one great reason for buying it. If you want an AAR CUDA but need a real trunk and back seat, this is the best handling intermediate supercar we've ever driven. GM holds an advantage in ride and smoothness, but the featherweight engine, massive tires, wide rear track, and stiff suspension grant the car astounding dexterity, lightning reflexes, and amazing grip. We measured 0.75 Gs of lateral acceleration. This is on par with 2-seat sport cars. Braking performance was of a similar rank due to the same factors. We embraced the Roadrunner's move from the compact Valiant to Plymouth's roomier, quieter, and plusher new Sebring personal car. Though it's not the D-stock ringer the Valiant Roadrunner was, it's a much better all-around automobile. For all of its apparent drawbacks as an everyday automobile, the Superbird ranks with the most satisfying and purposeful performance cars we've ever driven.